Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am blessed with yet another fascinating guest. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi everyone, my name's Stephen Barnes. I'm based in Melbourne and I am the principal of a firm called Byronvale Advisors, which are turnaround business advisors and crisis management specialists. I began my journey in New Zealand while I was at university. I had a growing interest in small businesses. I started my own consulting business there. It was at the height of the recession in the early 90s. So I was getting asked a lot of questions about a lot of struggling businesses, but being 21 at the time, people asked me, how do I know what I know? You haven't been there, you haven't done that. So I started and built a cafe, ran that, and through that connection, I ended up actually moving into the financial markets area of a trading bank. I worked there on a lot of complex problems. I was a senior trader during the Asian crisis, the exception of the euro. I built financial products, and then I dovetailed back into more of an accounting arena, working with a global division as the CFO. I got poached out of ANZ and moved to a Big Four consulting firm, which I worked at for about 2 years, advising all sorts of companies from largest to reasonably small on a range of complex financial markets issues. I got a little bit disheartened with that role and that environment, so I went back to what I truly love, is helping businesses, and that's how Byronvale Advisors began. So we have done a range of engagements from very large multinationals, publicly listed companies, right down to sole trader businesses in a variety of industries, from steel manufacturing to aviation to horse racing to property development and building construction, engineering, RTO training organisations, brewing, IT, software development, hedge funds, a range of different businesses. So we work on a model at Byronvale Advisors. It's called a Polymathic Consulting Model, where we actually fit our team around our engagement and our clients. So it's not always the same people that we roll out to each engagement. But what we do is we make sure that you have the right people at the right place at the right time. We think that gives our clients the best result and in the most efficient way. Thanks very much from sunny Melbourne.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Fascinating background you've had, and you've really spanned a wide range of different businesses. So from your experience, what are some of the early warning signs that a business might be heading towards insolvency, and how can they be addressed?
Well, I'm going to actually describe them in types of frogs. So frog is a creature that has evolved over a long period of time, and can do great things like, leap 20 times its length. And so are businesses, but there's different types of frogs. We have a type of frog that we call our boiled frog, and you've probably heard about a boiled frog. That frog sits in a pot, and as it boils, it slowly dies when it hadn't worked out that it needed to jump out of the boiling water before it was boiled. So with businesses, the characteristics of those businesses and the signs that we see are introversion and inertia in those businesses. So we see a lot of complacency. We see management with their head in the sand a little bit, cultural rigidity. We see an entrenchment of the status quo in those businesses, low motivation of the staff, and we also see a lot of people getting benefits without a lot of increase in productivity. So there's stagnant businesses. An example of a couple of businesses that people may know that have gone that way are Kodak and Tupperware, for instance. And more recently in Australia and New Zealand, we've seen Godfrey's, the vacuum cleaner company. They would be the type of companies that I would characterise as boiled frogs, and the signs that are applicable to those. We have another type of frog which I call a bullfrog. So bullfrogs are chest beating, need to be seen as having the best of everything and living the life of a highly successful business. We're underneath that. What we actually see is some other characteristics of actually just not spending any time on the business, but actually just wanting to live the life of someone that is really successful. You can drive around different parts of Melbourne, for instance, that are industrial and things, and you'll see more flashy cars and there than the affluent parts of Melbourne. They want to be seen with the latest trappings. They want to be seen that they want to walk around the office and think that they know everything, and not actually giving a lot of direction. So they're what we call bullfrogs. We have another one that or characteristics I call drowned frogs. So drowned frogs are over-ambitious super salesman type people that are highly successful, but they don't actually ever believe in failure. So they don't want to believe it, so they just carry on and keep going, and away they go, and it's their way. They know everything. They don't listen to anybody else. They usually don't have very good financial management. They have a board, it's usually a net board or a board that's just there as a figurehead rather than actually running as a board. A couple of examples of those are for companies that your audience may know are WeWork is a good example with Adam Newman. Another one would be Travis Kalanick from Uber. Locally, some people that you may know are Christopher Skase and Alan Bond in Australia, and maybe even Ron Briley from New Zealand, those sort of people. So they'd be what I call drowned frogs. And then I have another sort of indicator or sign, which I describe as tadpoles. So tadpoles are businesses that are either failed startups or large businesses that take on a project, and they just stick with them regardless of if they're actually a good idea or not. And the very first person that I'd call that was a guy called Sir Clive Sinclair, who was the inventor of the first personal computer. And he had all these great ideas and things like that, but they went out of business because they just, they were more thrilled about their idea than actually having a business and making it viable. They was more focused on the idea. So they're the sorts of signs. There's one other that's not a sign, like a tadpole, that I think is really important for your viewers. When we go to university and you learn about business, you learn that sales minus expenses equals profit. And I think that's absolutely the wrong way to look at business. And it's a way that people get into trouble, because it makes people focus on sales being the first part of their equation. And all they do is focus on sales. So if they get into a problem and they're running out of money, they just focus on trying to get more sales. And then they keep on spending more time on sales. So I think you need to flip that equation around. It's profit equals sales minus expenses. If you focus on profit, you're less likely to get into trouble.
That is fascinating, the analogy of the different types of frogs. It's very, very clear what is happening in each of those cases. So can you describe your approach to turning around a business that's facing challenges? What are the key strategies that you employ?
Okay, so businesses are like people, and businesses get sick sometimes. So I have an approach which I call triage. And triage is like what you think at the hospital. So it's called triage because it classifies different problems. One's into ones that, if I do something about now, it will make a huge difference, or ones that I do something now will really make no difference. And then you have the ones that, regardless of what I do, doesn't make any difference at all. So I start and look at a business firstly like that, and then I run through my whole triage process. So the process is in stages. So the first part is the analysis stage. So we're looking at what is the problem of the business and what's driven us to the stage that we're at the moment. Once we understand that, we then move to the next stage, which is about just shoring up our business so that we can then have a platform to move forward and turn it around. I call that the emergency phase. And think of it, a lot of it's to do with cash flow at that stage. And I think of cash as blood of the business. It's the bit that keeps us going, but it's the part that links our heart and our head. Just like in a patient. So in the emergency phase, just think like at emergency department in a hospital. We're not really focusing, if you come in after a motorcycle accident, we're not really focusing so much on your broken leg. We just want to make sure your heart's beating and your head's working and the blood's flowing, right? We'll deal with your broken leg down the track, but that's not the most important thing at the moment. So that's how we do that with the business and the emergency phase. We're looking at what do I need to do now just to keep alive and operating. And then we get to the third stage, which I call the crisis stabilization phase. That's when we actually start the real turnaround, and it's a longer process. It's about, we've got a platform now that we can come up with a plan to start turning the business around. And off we go with that. And we look at all parts of business. So we do look at sales and marketing. We do look at operations. We look at the staff that we've got. We look at the culture. We look at how we communicate with stakeholders. We look at all aspects of it, as well as the financial management.
Well, that is really fascinating. It's almost like being in a hospital, the way you would be triaged through a hospital emergency center. Definitely the same that you would have to do for business. So can you share a particularly memorable or challenging corporate restructuring case that you handled?
Yeah, the one I want to talk about is actually one that's quite personal to me, because apart from running my advisory business, I also have a investment business, but we only invest in distressed businesses. And we actually invested in a mechanical engineering business nearly 2.5 years ago. The business was in a lot of trouble. It had a sole trader owner and 2 staff. And we ended up buying the assets, and the owner ended up declaring bankruptcy. They owed the tax office $200,000. They owed unpaid superannuation of about $60,000. They owed creditors about another $40,000, and they're only turning over about $300,000 a year. So there was no way at all about them being able to just survive as they were. And they were a bit one of our boiled frogs, because they've been going for 8 years, and then all of a sudden something happened, and they were in a lot of trouble. So we took over that company. We then worked with the owner, and we moved forward, and within 10 months we had 6 staff and we were turning a profit.
Wow.
Within a year we ended up running out of room in the premises, so we moved to premises twice the size. A month after that, I actually acquired another business which I rolled into it. So today we're profitable. We're moving ahead. We're doing some R&D. We're doing some projects, and we've got 13 staff. So that's in just over 2 years. So that's a real case of an example that we turned around. And apart from that, we still employ the person that was the sole trader, and he will at some stage, probably towards the end of this year, end up buying back into the company. So it'll be he's not only working just for me, he's working for himself. And he would tell you that it hasn't just changed his business, it's changed his life, because he'll have a lot better business at the end of it. But we do a couple of little things. I want to give you a couple of examples of some really simple things that we did right at the start that can show you that how to make a difference. So this person was losing $100,000 a year, but this person and his 2 staff were getting Uber Eats for lunch every Friday. So that was $100 a week. That was $5,000 of that $100,000. So we stopped Uber Eats for lunch on Friday and bring your own. Another thing was in the industry that they were in, they usually charge for consumables, oil, rags, those sorts of things that they use. But he wasn't. So we turned around and put a charge on for consumables, and no customer complained, because everyone else in the industry does it. So it was almost like we were the outlier because we weren't. But that saved him generated another $20,000. So in the space of 5 minutes, quarter of that loss was resolved just by looking at the business a little bit differently, without actually fundamentally changing the business. So,
wow, that is just fascinating. Very, very simple things that one can miss unless you're really paying attention to where the money is going.
Yeah.
So how do you assist businesses in the pre-solvency stage to avoid further financial distress?
Okay, with the pre-solvency stage, what we do is we still run our triage process, but what's really important to people is that getting involved and getting us involved early. You have so many more options. As I said, with this particular one example case that I just gave you, he'd been operating for 8 years and then had an event. And Ernest Hemingway, in his book The Sun Also Rises, has a quote in there where one of the characters is asked how he went bankrupt, and he said slowly and then suddenly. And that's exactly what happened. So if you get to the stage where you're at the suddenly, then your options are a lot limited, and you're looking at down the barrel of formal insolvency options, which don't necessarily give you that great an outcome. So we're about saving businesses. The earlier you come and the greater the options you have. If you want to, also the other key part for us to help you is that you have to actually want to be helped. You actually want to put the work in.
Yes.
So we take our clients through that process and say, what do you actually want to do? And if you don't, we can also help you towards the formal insolvency But what that will do is mean that the overall loss isn't so great. So getting in early is really my key tip about how I work with pre-insolvency people.
Okay.
So, and we're also a little bit different than your usual accountants or lawyers. Turnaround advisors need to be shoulder deep into the business. So we're
Right.
not people that are going to sit in our office and send your office stuff and say, go and do this and come back. And after we've dealt with our other 10 customers or clients, we'll come back and send you an email again. We're actually going to be involved. We want to understand your business. We want to understand what your staff think, you think your stakeholders are, and work with you holistically in your business.
That's fantastic. So can you explain what safe harbor advisory is and how it's become a significant aspect of your work?
Okay, so safe harbor is a part of the Corporations Act in Australia. So it's only in Australia, it's not in New Zealand or anywhere else. And what it does is it gives directors of companies a defence against insolvent trading.
Right.
So it's not available to sole traders or trusts or those businesses. It's only available to companies and directors of those companies. The legislation allows is that if you get a qualified advisor or someone that knows what they're doing, someone like Byronvale Advisors, they can come in and work with you on a plan with the idea of trying to get you a better outcome than if you didn't. So it allows the directors to carry on the business under the supervision or guidance of an expert in turnarounds to actually carry on the business without having to enter into anything formal in insolvency or give away the control of the business.
Right. That's awesome. It really gives you back control. So, what motivates you to help businesses regain control and improve their operations?
Well, I think a fundamental thing that people don't understand about business is that every business is a family business. That I don't care if you're BHP or the local sole trader micro business. Every
Yeah.
business is a family business because it involves people and people have families.
Yes.
So what upsets me is that businesses end up becoming people's life, whereas it shouldn't be that way around.
Yes.
It should be families first and then business. So what I think that motivates me is that, people dig holes. They keep on and they think I have to work harder. So, Dave, the plumber, turns around and goes, well, I'm not doing very well, so I'll just go and work more on the tools. And I'm the only person that can do it. So they end up working 14, 15-hour days, 7 days a week. And, then they're tired. And then they're not, because they're tired, they're not doing the other things they need to do. So we talk about, there's only 3 reasons businesses also go belly up or fail. One is because the owners don't have the skills, the business skills to run a business.
Right.
Or they don't apply those skills is the second one. Or the third one is they spend too much time in their business and not on their business.
Yes.
And I'm not having a go at anyone about saying they're not good at what they do, because I don't know any electrician, for instance, that's gone out of business because they're bad at being an electrician. What we're saying is you've got to start thinking about what your business is and say, what am I actually doing? I'm actually a business owner. I'm not an electrician. Do I have the skills to run my business? And what we want to do is help you get those skills so that you're a successful business. That's what motivates us. And I absolutely hate seeing headlines in the paper about businesses going under that I know don't need to go under. So
The tragedy.
ask early, get the help is the answer to that. So
I love that. So, what are some of the common challenges that you encounter in your line of work, and how have you overcome them with regards to rescuing businesses and restructuring?
As I said, I think that my biggest problem I have is getting people to come and talk to us early. I mean, come and talk to us. You might not need us today, but come and talk to us early and at least start thinking about your problems and not just putting your head in the sand.
Yes.
Um, I think mental health is a really big problem in my space. Um,
Okay.
People get to the stage where they've got so much stress that it doesn't do their mental health much good. And as a Western society, we're really bad at talking about businesses. So we've seen over the last 10 years, we started getting a lot better at talking about mental health. So we see things like "Are you okay?" days and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But if you go along to a barbecue and someone says, "How's your business?" the first reply is "Great,"
Mhm.
and then you try and deflect the answer. Even if it's not great. And when there's statistics in both sides of the Tasman around about these sort of numbers that 45% of small businesses aren't making any money at all, and
Yes.
of the ones that are making money, only about 60% are making more than the average. Sorry, 60% are making less than the average wage. So they're not
Right.
actually making a lot of money, most businesses. And 98% of all businesses in Australia, and about the same amount in New Zealand, are actually small businesses. So,
Okay.
they're, they're, it's a large part of the business landscape that we're
Yeah.
talking about. So if you take those numbers and say, well, you know, almost half of them aren't making any money, that's a problem.
Mhm. It is. It's a big problem. So, how has COVID-19 impacted your work? And what advice have you been giving businesses, post-COVID to get back on their feet?
Um, well, I think COVID, and there's a couple of other factors like Ukraine, for instance,
Yes.
um, um, that sort of folded in together a little bit. But with
Mhm.
COVID itself, again, both here in Australia and New Zealand and a lot of other places around the world, the government stepped in and supported businesses.
Yes.
Um, what that did, though, is basically allow businesses to not think about their business in the sense that they could have been in trouble already. So it just gave them a big pause. So,
Right.
yeah, Melbourne, we were in lockdown for 270 something days, so it just meant I can have a big pause. It didn't mean the problem went away. So then we also had the ones that, it got them by enough, but their business was essentially not there anymore. So we think of, downtown Melbourne, we've got a whole pile of cafes and things like that, and people aren't coming back to work straight away and things like that. So,
Yes.
still got to catch up on the bills they weren't paying during lockdowns. They've got a lower customer number and they've got a cost of living increase. So what we're starting to see now, and again on both Australia and New Zealand, is there's double-digit growth in the number of formal insolvency actions.
Right.
Um, you know, Around about 20% in the last 6 months, growth from the prior 6 months, about 40% from this time last year in number of insolvencies. In New Zealand, it's much the same, those sort of statistics. So we're seeing a lot of that issues coming home to roost. Um, we also saw people that, on the flip side, a lot of people didn't do very well in COVID, but a lot of people thought they
Mhm.
were doing very well during COVID. So, and I'm thinking of the construction industry. So, the construction industry in Australia were allowed to continue working. There was a lot of money put into getting the construction industry carrying on,
Yeah.
especially as we weren't getting immigration at the time. So they were supporting the construction industry. There was a lot of incentives to sign up for new houses and things like that. So,
Okay.
and then we also, but what we did see also was there was a lack of staff, there was a lack of materials, there was
Yes.
higher interest costs, there's a higher cost of living, and there's fixed rate contracts. So it's not a surprise to me that a lot of construction industry firms are in trouble.
Yeah.
Again, I go back to we could see that that writing on the wall a couple of years ago. And,
Yes.
my firm, we contacted 100 construction firms in Melbourne to just test that theory out a couple of years ago,
Yes.
and all bar none said, we're having the best time of our life. And I said, well, what about the headwinds that I can see coming? And they go, don't care, living in the moment, living the dream. They're out buying new Ford Rangers, going on overseas holidays, buying new flash things, and now, it's coming home to roost for them.
It
So
is.
again, I don't like saying that. That's not a gloat or I told you so. That is
Mm,
just the fact that, again, people see what they want to see today. And what
yeah.
I'm trying to say is I think you need to have a look a bit further ahead. And, when you start getting into trouble, I think you actually need to do something about it and not
Yeah.
just bury your head in sand.
Let's talk about the last question that I have for you. Based on your extensive experience, what future trends do you foresee in the realm of business stability and growth post this crisis?
Look, I think in my space, the Australia is playing a little bit of a catch up. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that hinders us in Australia for is and in New Zealand is legislation that I call and is known around the world in my industry as creditor-centric legislation. So the legislation what you can do legally to help save your business is driven around the creditors and making sure the creditors are looked after. If we go
Right.
to other places in the world, Europe, UK, Singapore, Canada, US, we have what we call a debtor-centric one, which is a more holistic approach and more entrepreneurial approach to saving businesses, which is about looking at the whole business, all aspects, all stakeholders, and that might even be the community that they live in, not just
Yes.
so it could be a key business in that community that half the workforce are employed by. In Australian legislation, they won't care about that. Overseas, the legislation would care about that.
Yeah.
So that's changing. So there's a parliamentary joint committee review happening at the moment. It's looking at changing that legislation. It's also trying to bring the personal insolvency and the corporate insolvency legislation together under one umbrella.
Right.
Because a lot of people, for instance, are sole traders and some other businesses. Some people have their businesses in trusts, which is treated like a personal person, and whereas it's actually a company as well. So there's a mix and a hotspot, and that's creating confusion. It doesn't mean we've got options. It's not particularly entrepreneurial about encouraging business owners to have a go and
Yeah.
how they carry on. So I think that's going to change. I think that is changing. We also have an organisation that started a couple of years ago in Australia called the Association for Business Restructuring and Turnarounds. So
Right.
there's people like myself involved in that, and there's a range of us. There's several hundred of us that really want to change the focus about saving and rescuing businesses rather than how do we nicely shut them down or or just get money to creditors.
That is fantastic. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your knowledge with our community. Pretty sure there's people out there who might need your services. How can people reach you? What is the best way to connect with you?
I'd encourage people to first look at my website, www.byronvaleadvisors.com. That would be the best way to, you'll see what we do, some services, there's a contact page there. I've also got a couple of books out, so they can grab a copy of those books. They're both on my website, but at the usual places like bookstores and Amazon and all the online bookstores and things like that in different formats. One of them's just come out last week called Triage, so that book, for instance, goes right through my whole process that I do with a turnaround. So That's what I would encourage people to do first if they want to get hold of me. But there's also a phone number to ring on the website, so happy for people to give me a call. I'm happy to have a chat to them anyway.
Fantastic. Well, I've got your website displaying at the bottom of the screen. If anybody out there is needing assistance and help, do check out Stephen's new book. Like I said earlier, your process does sound like an emergency room. Triage is the book title of the book. Perfect analogy for what you do, Stephen. Thank you so much for coming online today.
Thanks very much for the opportunity, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you for tuning in, everybody. The Diversity Connector is bringing you stories and voices from all over the world, different aspects of life. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making